Hey. Thank you. And yeah, so for a title for my talk, I could have given an R-rated version, but I decided to go with the PG version instead. And but here I want to kind of well, to chill out a little bit and not, my first slide was very much tongue-in-cheek, that it's not all doom and gloom. And so stick with me for a few minutes here. What I'm briefly going to do is review last year's weather, focus on the forecast, that's why you're sitting around here, and a little bit on the timing, and in particular the early season weather forecasts. And something that I didn't get to, and it was something that Mark Moore brought up last year, and if those of you, many of you probably know Mark, I gave him kind of honorary membership in the author list here. I think retirement has suited him well. He doesn't look a day over 80, as far as I'm concerned. But and to look into more these kind of short-term weather events, and can we forecast the frequency and intensity of those? And so depending on what you guys kind of want, if I'm back here next year, God willing, or whatever, that, you know, if that would be the forecast rather than the mean conditions, maybe we can do something about that. But anyway, let's hit in. Okay, last winter, it was not too bad, as long as you live in the state of Washington and that's where you do your, you know, winter recreation. How many are here from Oregon? Well, tough. Yeah, you know, you can see what happened there on the temperatures were pretty near normal, but the precipitation was decidedly below normal in Oregon. They had much less favorable conditions and much more problems with the water supply in the summer following. Okay, one of the things the Climate Office does every year is kind of go through a top 10 of, you know, the big weather events. And one of the things that really stood out for us was what happened last December, so December 2017, and in particular this event of kind of fair weather, very settled weather. On the lower right there is a 500 millibar anomaly map just showing the pressure pattern aloft, showing big ridge aloft. And so a very quiet period of the weather. That traced to the left is the temperatures at Paradise, Washington, at you know, 5,100 feet or something like that. High temperatures near 60, low temperatures in the 40s in December, which is really weird. Even much warmer there than in the lowlands. If you look at, first direct your attention to the lower right there, that the temperature anomalies for the month as a whole, the mountains were warm and the lowlands were cold because, in part because of this persistent ridge that kept us kind of in the gunk. Bad air quality as shown on the left. We're breathing each other's effluvia, I think is the way you put it. But in the mountains, you know, sunny and nice, if you could find the snow. We had a white Christmas here in the Puget Sound lowlands. Doesn't happen very often. You know, everybody got to like a white Christmas. I was especially pleased with this. It kept my sister-in-law from visiting us for the holiday, and so that's all good. Going back to a 500 millibar map here for the, this is an anomaly map for the, here December through March. And again, around the reds, that's higher pressure aloft, a clockwise circulation around the blues, the lows, a counterclockwise circulation. You can see that the anomalous flow was actually out of Canada. And so you think, oh man, it'd be bitterly cold. It wasn't. It was near normal temperatures. And so when there are higher heights aloft, it tends to be warmer also. And so when you look at the winter before, 16-17, it was a little bit different. It was actually colder that year, even though the air was coming off the ocean. That was because it just did a quick little hook over the ocean before coming in here, and was generally wetter in most places. Most locations in the Washington Cascades and Olympics had more snow that year than last year. Okay. So about some of the forecasts that we use, the Climate Prediction Center is the official source of these forecasts, and a bunch of words there about what they use there. What I'd like you to focus on is the last 2 points there, and that is that the forecast skill peaks in late winter and is a lot higher in terms of temperature than precipitation. And in fact, I've done some recent work that the Climate Prediction Center forecasts for fall are very low skill, even lower skill than in spring and summer, which I was a little surprised by, for temperature as well as precipitation. Just overall, and this is all seasons of the year, it shows on the left the skill in our kind of seasonal forecast and temperature on the left and precipitation on the right. The redder the color, the better. And you can see in terms of precipitation, it's just kind of not there. Again, looking at all seasons together, it looks like we may have a little bit of skill at sometimes, but temperature right now is what we have something to go on. All right, so what about what's happening right now? This is a map of the sea surface temperature anomalies for the whole world. You can first direct your attention to the tropical Pacific where it's yellow, and that means warmer than normal, and that's why that dirty word El Nino is getting kind of bandied about. If you look up in the Gulf of Alaska, there's a red color, and it's like, uh-oh, what is, and there's been some chatter about that. It turns out that's a fairly thin layer of water that's warmer than normal, and so we're not sure just how much extra heat is there. It's a concern, but it's not like what we've seen before, and just in the last few days I've seen those anomalies decrease in intensity as a few storms have rolled through there. Nevertheless, the idea, there's very strong evidence we're going to have an El Nino of a weak to moderate intensity. And so there, the red bars at the upper right show the prediction based on a whole host of models and other things of El Nino conditions this coming up in, this winter into spring, and it's something like now an 85% chance. Not an absolute 100% chance, but the chance of La Nina is zero. If you look at the lower left plot, this shows the magnitude of the El Nino that's expected. And different models have a different spin on it, but it's more in the kind of weak to moderate category. And that's a key thing there because we get a different sort of response in the weather patterns around here to the weak to moderate El Ninos versus the stronger ones. And so again, here, apologies to a handful of folks from Oregon, but what I have here is just going back to the 1890s for a climate division in Washington State, what the temperatures were here December through March each year, going back there. And this is for the West Cascades Climate Division. It's basically the west slopes of the Cascades from the Columbia to the Canadian border. And what I've circled there are the kind of recent years that are sort of like this one. With one exception, there's 1415 when that was the year the blob was really rearing its ugly head, and that was just way out there, unprecedented in many respects. But so what you can see there is, for one thing, there's kind of an upward trend in the temperatures if you haven't heard about that. But to greater and lesser extents, when we've had these weak to moderate El Ninos in the past decade or two, it's been a little bit warmer than normal, but we're not expecting something like the disaster of 1415. Okay, as a little bit of an aside, but it relates to some stuff I want to show in just a sec. The Washington State Climate Office is working with its counterpart in Oregon, a little proposal to kind of see if we can provide more targeted information for planning purposes for the ski resort industry. And I didn't come up with the title seasonal forecast. I think it's kind of lame, but anyway. You can tell my collaborator, you can tell Phil that, okay. But the idea here is that some of the maps that I'll be showing you all, it's likely to be a little warmer, a little wetter than normal or something like that. Is that really all that we can do? Or can we actually deliver a little bit more information that is more meaningful and useful to the resort industry? And we have a social scientist involved to kind of, how you do that. And so one of the ideas that I had was that conceivably, what really matters to them is what conditions are like early in the ski season, and in particular, what kind of snow they have around for the Christmas season when everybody and their dog is, crowding the slopes. And so what I did there is, and this also relates to a point that I want to make, is I took a composite of, in this case, it's the SWE at 5 places north to south in the Washington Cascades from Harts Pass down to Lone Pine, of what each year on January 1, what the SWE was, basically how much snow there was. And the little red dots there show these weak to moderate El Ninos those years. And the screaming message I want you to get across there is that, some years were below normal, a couple were above normal, but when you look at them as a group, the effects of El Nino on the early part of the winter season are essentially negligible. And so, don't panic. There's liable to be some good conditions. Now, we could have one of these years like 04, 05 that was terrible, but the deck isn't stacked that way, and so we just don't really know. For what it's worth, using some of the latest information, I have a model I've developed, and that information in kind of September and just recently, and ran out a few forecasts. There was a range of outcomes, but again, what I came up with a snow water equivalent on 1 January, essentially what happens in the next couple of months, is kind of near normal. But El Nino does, eventually rear its ugly head. Here's a time series at the top of temperatures, daily temperatures from November 1st through the end of March of 2009-10, a recent weak to moderate El Nino. And the idea there is that and that kind of band of diaper gravy colored, band there, and the top is the normal range of temperatures. What you can see is up until, the first half of that record, the temperatures kind of go up and down, but they're pretty close to normal overall. And then after January 1st, you tend to have warmer temperatures than normal. And so this is a fairly typical outcome. And in particular, it's not unheard of, but it's rare to have really cold nighttime temperatures after the first of the year in El Nino. And then for what it's worth, just for completeness, it shows the precipitation that kind of went on with that year, just the accumulation in green versus the normal in brown. And this is, again, for the Paradise Ranger Station. All right. These are kind of washed out, so the screaming message here, I looked at recent events and how the snow depths built up over time. And at places like Baker, it's not, it's pretty typical. It's maybe down a little bit during El Ninos. In places, the lower plots that you can't see is at Snoqualmie Pass, which is, of course, more temperature sensitive. And there, after the first of the year, there typically is less snow growth in the snowpack than usual. All right. Here, I really have to thank Mark, in all seriousness aside. He provided this slide, and I think it's a very important one, and one to kind of keep in mind. And what this is showing, the blue bars refer to the entire kind of record, 1950 to 2018. The red bars refer to just the past 20 years. And what they refer to is the average number of fatalities due to avalanches in what's called the Washington area. It includes Oregon. The vast majority, unfortunately, of the fatalities are in Washington. But the idea here is that both in the entire record and in the recent record, during the El Nino years, there's something like half, on average, the number of fatalities of of the normal amount or usual amount. And so this is good news, right? Well, nobody's clapping. Well, whatever. And so I'm not an avalanche forecaster. I don't know necessarily why all the details here. Mark tells me that there could probably less persistent weak layers, but I'd be happy to talk about that afterwards and learn something. Okay, on to the forecast. These are the official ones out of the Climate Prediction Center for, this is temperature November through January, and then a little bit of an overlap, January through March. Here, above normal is, greater odds of above normal temperatures than usual. And the way they give the forecast, it's kind of 1/3 of the time it's above normal, 1/3 of the time it's near normal in that range, 1/3 below normal. There's higher odds than usual of being in that upper category. In terms of precipitation, again, we don't have as much to go on and very little of an indication here. Maybe kind of in the kind of northern Rockies, the idea that there could be a little bit on the dry side. This, just to give you an idea of what the kind of the uncertainty in these forecasts, just direct your attention to the smaller postage stamps there, the bottom two rows. These are individual models. Hopefully you can kind of see in the back, it's North America, but where it's red, these are where the models are saying it's going to be warmer than normal, or where it's blue, cooler than normal. And the idea there is, and maybe this pointer actually works. Yeah. And so in each of the, here's Washington State right around there, is that there's a fairly strong, if not overwhelming consensus that it's going to be warmer than normal out of, in Washington State. This particular one just has this kind of about neutral. And as a group, they're having kind of slight temperature, or warmer than normal temperatures. When you look at precipitation, it's really a mixed bag where there's some a little drier, some nothing at all, one that's a little wetter. And so the message here is we don't really have a lot to go on in precipitation. All right, so just I'm going to skip that and just go into the idea that where we want to go in these seasonal forecasts is to go, get away from some of these kind of means over 3-month periods and stuff. And again, how are the events that really count? What are the chances of more of them or more severe of those? And so we're just starting to try to do that. But I think a lot of the avalanche forecasters especially would like to know, are we going to have more of these than usual? And I can't really say that. All right, last slide. So how the upcoming fall and winter season is liable to play out? Well, looking outside, it started raining, and so my forecast is for the next 100 days, a warm rain will fall continuously, no birds will sing, and all children will be born with antlers and hooves. So, anyway, well, actually, a little bit less likely, I'm going to, here are kind of where my other hats, and not just focusing on the, snowpack and that sort of thing, but that chance on most streams we get a little less flooding in these kind of years than usual, but it kind of depends on, again, just what aspect it has. Windstorms, and I should say in 06, 07, we had a huge flood on Mount Rainier and at some of the southern slopes of the Olympics, and especially Mount Rainier, some all-time records set in stream flows. So they're still possible. Windstorms, a little bit lower odds, but again, that was the year of the Hanukkah Eve storm, so they can, anything can happen. Definitely, I would say that the chances of real cold air outbreaks, especially in the lowlands, there's a decreased odds of those. And so the deck is stacked that way. And then finally, this here, because last year was kind of a weak La Nina and the indications, it was a near normal temperatures. And this year, the preponderance of evidence is a little bit above normal temperatures. I would say that, it's very likely we'll have less snow than last year, but nothing like the disaster of 14, 15. And so with that, thanks.